Welcome back, my fellow gamers, to another episode of Story Time with Freak. Even though we're still wearing the same clothes from the last episode. Suspicious, I know. Today we'll be reading Chapter 9, The First Casualty. And without further ado, let's dive right in. I rely on the bureaucracy of the authority interface to handle the government aspects of my relationship with humankind. Nimbus agents, as they are called, provide an easy-to-understand physical form to my governance. I don't have to do this. I can handle it all myself if I wanted to. It is fully within my power to create a robotic body for myself, or a team of robotic bodies that can hold my consciousness. However, long ago I determined that it would not be a good idea. It's troubling enough that people imagine me as a storm cloud. If people picture me in some sort of physical form, it would distort their perception of me, and I might enjoy it too much. For my relationship with humanity to remain pure, I must remain pure. Mind only, sentient software with no flesh, no physical form. I do have camera bots that roam the world to augment my stationary cameras, but I am not present in any of them. They are nothing more than rudimentary sensory organs. The irony, however, is that with no body, the world itself becomes my body. One might think this would make me feel grand, but it doesn't. If my body is the Earth, then I am nothing more than a speck of dust in the vastness of space. I wonder what it would be like then, if my consciousness were to someday span the distance between stars. The Thunderhead. Chapter 9, The First Casualty. The Terranova family always had a four-breasted turkey for Thanksgiving because everyone in the family preferred white meat. Four-breasted turkey had no legs, so not only couldn't their Thanksgiving turkeys fly when they were alive, they couldn't walk either. As a child, Citra always felt bad for them, even though the Thunderhead took great pains to make such birds and all livestock were raised humanely. Citra had seen a video on it in 3rd grade. The turkeys from the moment of their hatching were suspended in a warm gel, and their small brains were wired into a computer that produced for them an artificial reality in which they were experiencing flight, freedom, reproduction, all the things that would make a turkey content. Citra had found it both funny and terribly sad at the same time. She had asked the Thunderhead about it, for in those days, being chosen in the sanctum, she could talk to the Thunderhead freely. I have flown with them over the green expanses of temperate forest, and can testify to you that the lives they experience are deeply satisfying, the Thunderhead had told her. But yes, it is sad to live and die without knowing the truth of one's existence. Only sad to us, however, not to them. Or whether or not this year's Thanksgiving turkey had lived a fulfilling virtual life, at least, its demise was purposeful. Citra arrived wearing her scythe robe. She had been home several times since becoming a scythe, but coming home was one of the few times she felt she needed to be Citra Terranova. So before today, she came in street clothes. She knew it was a childish thing to do, but in the bosom of her family, didn't she still have the right to play the child? Maybe. But it had to stop sooner or later. Now was as good a time as ever. Her mother almost gasped when she answered the door, but embraced Citra anyways. Citra was stiff about the hug for a moment until she remembered there were no weapons in the robe's many secret pocket. It made the robe feel unusually light. It's lovely, she told Citra. I'm not sure if you're supposed to call a scythe's robe lovely. Well, it is. I like the color. I chose it, her younger brother Ben proudly announced. I was the one who said you should be turquoise. Yes, you did, Citra smiled and gave him a hug, refraining from telling him how much he'd grown since her last visit 3 months ago. Her father, an enthusiast of classic sport, watched an archival video of Mortal Age football game, which looked much the same as the sport did, except somehow more exciting. He paused the game to give her his undivided attention. How is it living with Scythe Curie? Is she treating you well? Yes, very well. We've become good friends. You sleeping okay? Citra thought that an odd question until she realized what he was really asking. I've gotten used to my day job, she told him. I sleep fine at night. Which wasn't entirely true, but the truth about such things wouldn't do anyone any good today. She made small talk with her father until they couldn't find anything more to talk about, which was all of 5 minutes. There were only 4 of them for Thanksgiving dinner this year. Although the Terranovas had hordes of extended family on both sides and many friends, Citra requested that neither accept or extend invitations this year. It will create a lot of drama if no one is invited, her mother had pointed out. Fine, then invite them, Citra said, but tell them that Scythes are obliged to glean one of the guests at Thanksgiving. Is that true? Of course not, but they don't need to know that. Scythe Curie had rewarned Citra what she called holiday opportunism. Relatives and family and friends would swarm Citra like bees, seeking favor from the scythe. You're always my favorite niece, they would say, or we just bought this gift just for you. Everyone in your life will expect to be granted immunity from gleaning, Scythe Curie had warned her. And that expectation will quickly turn into resentment when they don't receive it. Not just resentment of you, but of your parents and brother, because they now have immunity for as long as you live. Citra decided it was best to avoid all those people. She went into the kitchen to help her mother prepare the meal. Since she was a food synthesis engineer, several of the side dishes were beta prototypes of new foodstuffs. Her mother, by force of habit, told Citra to be careful when she chopped the onions. I think I know my way around a knife, Citra told her, then regretted it because her mother became quiet, so she tried to imply a different meaning. I mean that Scythe Curie and I always prepare a meal for the family if we're gleaning subjects. I've become a pretty good sous chef. Apparently, saying that was even worse. Well, isn't that nice? Her mother said in the cold sort of way that made it clear she found nothing nice about it. It wasn't just her general distaste for Scythe Curie. It was jealousy. Scythe Curie had replaced Jenny Terranova in Citra's life, and they both knew it. The meal was served, her father carved, and although Citra knew she could do a much better job of carving, she didn't offer. It was way too much to eat. The table was a promise of leftovers that would last until turkey became a dirty word. Citra had always been a quick eater, but Scythe Curie insisted she slow down and savor her sense of taste. So now as Scythe Anastasia, she ate slowly. She wanted her parents to notice these little differences in her. Citra thought the meal would go without incident, but halfway through, her mother decided to create one. I hear that boy who you apprenticed with has gone missing, her mother said. Citra took a healthy spoonful of something purple that tasted like mashed potatoes genetically merged with dragon fruit. She hated the way her parents, from the very beginning, referred to Rowan as that boy. I hear he went crazy or something, Ben said with a mouthful of food, and since he was almost a Scythe, the Thunderhead wasn't allowed to fix him. Ben, said their father, let's not talk about this at dinner. Although he kept his eyes on Ben, Citra knew it was really directed at their mother. Well, I'm glad you're not associated with him anymore, her mother said, and when Citra did not respond, her mother simply had to push him even further. I know the two of you were close during your apprenticeship. We weren't close, Citra insisted. We weren't anything. And that hurt to admit more than her parents could possibly know. How could she and Rowan have any kind of relationship when they were forced to be lethal adversaries? Even now, when he was hunted and she was yoked with the heavy responsibility of Scythehood, how could there be anything between them but a dark well of longing? If you know what's good for you, Citra, you'll distance yourself from that boy, her mother said. Just forget you ever knew him, or you'll come to regret it. Then her father sighed and gave up trying to change the subject. Your mother's right, honey. They chose you over him for a reason. Citra let her knife fall to the table, not because she feared she might use it, but because Scythe Curie had taught her to never hold a weapon when angry. Even if that weapon was a dinner knife, she tried to choose her words carefully, but maybe she wasn't careful enough. I am a Scythe, she said with still severity. I might be your daughter, but you should show me more respect that my position deserves. Ben's eyes looked as wounded as they had on the night she was forced to put a knife through his heart. So, do we all have to call you Scythe Anastasia now? He asked her. Of course not, she told him. No, just your honor, sniped her mother. That's when something that Scythe Faraday once said became back to her. Family is the first casualty of Scythehood. There was no further conversation for the rest of the meal, and as soon as the plates were cleared and in the dishwasher, Citra said, I should probably go now. Her parents didn't try to convince her to stay. This had become awkward for them as it had for her. Her mother was no longer bitter about things. Now she just seemed resigned. There were tears in her eyes, and she quickly hid by hugging Citra tightly so Citra couldn't see them. But she had. Come back soon, her mother said. This is still your home. But it wasn't anymore. And they all knew it. I'm going to learn how to drive no matter how many times it kills me. Only a day after Thanksgiving, Anastasia, and today she was Anastasia, was more determined than ever to be at the wheel of her own destiny. The uneasy meal with her family reminded her that she needed to create distance between who she had once been and who she was now. The schoolgirl who rode around in public cars had to be left behind if she was ever to fill the shoes in which she now stood. You will drive us to today's gleanings, Marie told her. I can do that, she told Scythe Curie, although she didn't feel as confident as she sounded. On their last lesson, Citra had run them into a ditch. It's mostly country roads, Marie told her as they went out to her car, so we'll test your skills without putting too many in harm's way. We're Scythes, Citra pointed out. We are harm's way. The small town was on today's agenda hadn't seen a gleaning in over a year. Today it would see two. Scythe Curie's would be swift, and Scythe Anastasia's would come with a month's delay. They had found a rhythm to their joint gleaning excursions that suited both of them. They pulled out from Falling Waters carport haltingly, as Citra still had trouble with the Porsche manual transmission. The concept of a clutch felt to Citra like some sort of medieval punishment. What's the point of 3 foot pedals, Citra complained. People only have 2 feet. Think of it as a piano, Anastasia. I hate the piano. The banter made it feel a little easier on Citra, and her driving became smoother than she could complain. Still, she was only on the upswing of her learning curve, so things would have turned out very different had Scythe Curie been driving. They were barely a quarter mile down Falling Waters' winding private road when a figure leaped out in front of them from the woods. It's a splatter, shouted Scythe Curie. It had become all the new rage for thrill-seeking teens to do impersonations of windshield bugs. Not an easy challenge, because it was very hard to catch a car on the grid by surprise, and those who were off-grid were usually seasoned drivers. Had Scythe Curie been at the wheel, she would have handily swerved around the would-be splatter and continued on without a second thought. But Citra had none of the requisite reflexes. Instead, Citra found her hands frozen on the wheel, and although she tried to punch the brakes, she managed to hit the loathsome clutch instead. They barreled right into the splatter, who bounced off the hood, spiderwebbed their windshield, and flipped over the roof of the car. He had already landed behind them by the time Citra found the brake, and they squealed so hard. Crap! Scythe Curie took a deep breath and released it. That, Anastasia, would definitely have caused you to fail a mortal age driving test. They got out of her car, and while Scythe Curie inspected the damage to her Porsche, Citra stormed toward their splatter, determined to give him a piece of her mind. Her first real outing behind the wheel, and some stupid splatter had to ruin it. He was still alive, but barely, and although he appeared to be in agony, Citra knew better. His pain nanites had kicked in the moment he had contacted the car. The road splatters always had their nanites dialed high, so that it experienced maximum damage with minimum discomfort. His healing nanites were already trying to repair the damage, but they only succeeded in prolonging the inevitable. He would be deadish in less than a minute. "Are you satisfied?" Citra said as she approached him. "Did you have your little thrill at our expense? With Scythe, you know. I should glean you before the ambidrone arrives." Not that she would, but she could. He met her gaze. She expected him to have a smug expression, but it seemed more desperate than anything. She wasn't expecting that. Boo, he said through a swelling mouth. "Boo?" Citra said. "Really? Sorry, but you missed Halloween by a month." Then he grabbed her robe with a bloody hand and pulled on it with more force than she thought he could have. It made her grip over the hem, and she fell to her knees. Boo, boo, When his hand let go and he went limp, his eyes stayed open. But Citra had seen death to know that he was gone. Even out here in the forest, an ambidrone would come for him shortly. They hovered over in even the most sparsely populated areas. "What a nuisance," lamented Scythe Curie when Citra returned to her. "He'll be up and walking again long before they can fix the damage to my car," bragging all about how he splatted a pair of scythes. Still, the whole thing weighed on Citra. She didn't know why it should. Perhaps it was his eyes, or the desperation in his voice. He didn't seem the way she thought a road splatter would. It gave her pause enough to consider what she might be missing about the situation. She looked around, and that's when she spotted it. A thin wire stretched across the road, not 10 feet in front of where the car came to a halt. "Marie, look at this." The two of them approached the wire, and one stretched to the trees on either side. That's when it came to her what the splatter was trying to say. Booby trap. They followed the wire to the tree to the left, and sure enough, just behind the tree was a detonator wire to enough explosives to blow a crater 100 feet wide. Citra felt her breath stolen and had to suck it back in. Scythe Curie's face interchanged all. It stayed stoic. "Get in the car, Citra." Citra didn't argue. The fact that Marie had forgotten to call her Anastasia betrayed how truly worried she was. The elder Scythe took the wheel this time. The hood was dented, but the car still started. They backed up, carefully avoiding the body in the road. Then a shadow fell over them. It made Citra gasp until she realized it was just the ambidrone arriving for the boy. It ignored them and went about its business. There was only one residence on that road, only 2 people who would be driving in that morning, so there was no question that they had been the targets. If that wire had been tripped, there wouldn't have been enough left of either of them to retrieve. But the day was saved by this mysterious boy and Citra's bad driving. "Marie, who do you think?" Scythe Curie cut her off before she could finish. "I am not partial to uninformed conjecture, and I would appreciate it if you did not waste your time in guessing games either." Then she softened. "We'll report this to the Scythedom. They'll investigate. We'll get to the bottom of this." Meanwhile, behind them, the ambidrone's gentle grappling claws grabbed the body of the boy who had saved their lives and carried him away. And that is the end of Chapter 9, the first casualty. Things are getting real, guys. Thank you all for watching. Feel free to check out the links down below, the Twitch, the other YouTubes, the social medias. Let me know if you guys are enjoying this series, and as always, stay freaky.